Good evening, everyone. I hope I am audible to you. So we will begin with Michel Foucault,
Good,
who is,
good evening, sir.
yeah, good evening, good evening. So Foucault is associated with both structuralism as well as post-structuralism. Part and parcel of his theory has been also used by the postmodernism because you will see that this uh, post-structuralism, postmodernism, they were overlapping each other, okay, along with the deconstruction. So that's how the theory progresses during the 1960s, 70s, 80s almost. And then Frederick Jameson will write about the late capitalism in 90s around. So we'll begin with Michel Foucault, very important from UGC point of view. So, similar to Sartre, Foucault's work is characterized by deep antipathy for bourgeois society. Okay, this is one of the characteristics because you will find that post-structuralists and the leftist Marxist critic and theorists, they have this left alignment. Okay, most of these postmodern theorists, also the deconstructionists, they have had this left alignment. Okay, they were not associated with this right wing politics or ideology. They were leftist always. So obviously, leftists mostly talk about or against the bourgeois society. So this is what Foucault will say. Also say he will also do like that of Sartre. So Foucault's work is characterized by deep antipathy for bourgeois society and culture and sympathy for marginalized groups such as the mad, homosexuals, and prisoners. I will come back to these points because his works actually talks about mads, homosexuals, and prisoners. They both also had strong interest in literature and psychology as well as philosophy, and both, after an early relative lack of political interest, became committed activists. So, what are the works written by Michel? Madness and Civilization. Before I will go to this, I just want to tell you a point regarding these French philosophers in particular. French philosophers has this unusual habit of going back to history, watching things out very carefully, then coming out with their own ideas. This is what you will see almost in all the French philosophers. Okay, they have this habit of reading history of philosophy. Okay, what are the other philosophers are saying, and then they will come up with their own ideas. When they will find a kind of void or space in those philosophers. This is what Michel Foucault will also do. So he will go back to, in order to analyze this idea of madness and civilization, he will go back to the history that in the ancient time, how was this concept of madness was, and then in the Renaissance time, how it was different from the past time, and then with the coming of the enlightenment, how madness has been segregated from the reason. Okay, reason and madness, these become two components. Initially they were united together. Okay, this is what he will call in madness and civilization, even in the birth of clinic. So he will go back to the history in order to trace back the idea that he is writing in his work. So in Madness and Civilization, the subtitle is a history of insanity in the age of reason. He's actually talking about how in the for example the Shakespearean fools, they are actually comprised of both madness as well as reason, because even if they are talking like a mad character, like a fool in the play, they are revealing one of the important facets of the play, one of the important thematic concern of the play. Take, for example, Porter scene from Macbeth or Gravedigger scene from Hamlet. So you will find that they are actually revealing some of the important thematic concern of the play. It's not that they are only mad, fool. They are enunciating anything and everything without any knowledge. No, they are very important characters in the context of the play. So initially, before Renaissance, during Renaissance, this madness and reason were in hand. A man is comprised of both kind of madness, a bit of madness, and then reason. This is what we will see in the Shakespearean fool. With the coming of this Enlightenment age, with the coming of the philosophies of Descartes, Hume, Leibniz, Schopenhauer, they started to segregate madness from this region. They said that if you will, they have made a code of conduct. If you will behave like in such way, then you are a proper person with reasonable sense, with a logical sense. And if you are not behaving in so manner, then you are mad. That's all. We have segregated madness from reason, and we started to open these asylum and all. Okay. Before that, people were living. Even before the opening of the asylum, people were living somehow. It's not that mad people were only killing people, something like that. But we have this the like I have said that we in the structuralism you will find that they have this very unusual habit of making structure of everything. So when they segregated this madness from reason, they find they are trying to give stability to the society. This is what they mean when they are segregating this. So this is what you will find in Madness and Civilization, a history of insanity in the age of reason. Then comes the next work, Birth of a Clinic. Again, he will go back in past, in history, in order to trace how this clinic, this hospital came into existence. Earlier, we have had these allopathy or something herbal kind of medicine and all. Why do we need these clinic hospitals? And here he came up with this idea of medical gaze. Okay, there is this lurking idea of medical gaze beneath this birth of the clinic, because with the coming of the hospitals, clinic, now the doctor started to carefully examine the body of the patient, and this is actually the objectification of the person. It's a gaze. You are no more a person but an object for a doctor. Okay, this is what he will say in Birth of a Clinic, an archaeology of medical perception. This is the subtitle. He talks about evolvement of medicine, and also he will talk about medical gaze and anti-historical. This is another term that he used, anti-historical, in this particular book, apart from medical gaze. So do remember, medical gaze is a term that he used in Birth of the Clinic. This is important. Then the next work is Order of Things, an archaeology of human sciences. In Order of Things, he came up with this idea of episteme. Episteme, this terms means actually knowledge. Okay, knowledge. So he talks about knowledge, power, those things that he will further um, analyze in archaeology of knowledge. Okay, so he talks about episteme in Order of Things, an archaeology of human sciences. Again, he will trace back the history of human science and all. Then archaeology of knowledge, published in 1969. Here he will particularly talk about power and knowledge. Power and knowledge. Okay, how power is associated with knowledge. How when you are having a knowledge, you are unconsciously exercising power. For example, I'm giving you just basic example. Right now, I'm teaching you. Okay, because I have, let's say, I have little bit more knowledge than you. That's why I have asked you to join the class at a particular point of time, and you all have joined. So unconsciously, I am actually exercising my power, because you also unconsciously, you actually admits this, or you accept that yes, sir has more knowledge than me. So this is how power and knowledge works. Okay, because I have more knowledge than you, that's why I'm exercising my power upon you, and you are accepting that. This is how this society works, this functions. When we go to a professor, when we go to a teacher, why we are so humble there, why we are so obliged to them, why we say good afternoon, good evening. There is a power relationship of power and knowledge there that works in every sphere of society. It's not just it also works in our home also, in the relationship of father and their children, mother and their children. Okay, it is everywhere. So this is about archaeology of knowledge. Then discipline and punishment, the birth of reason, in which he talks about the idea of panopticism, that he will trace back the history of, again, history of prison, how prison came into existence. Earlier we didn't have prison, but why do we need prison? We say that we need prison because we want to teach discipline to the culprits, to the person who committed some sin or a person who is a murderer. But actually, you are, I mean, they also give this explanation that we do not want to just hang a person because he committed a crime. We want to give them second chance. That's why we are teaching discipline when we are locking them inside the prison. But this is not the thing. You are not, I mean, you are actually again exercising power upon that particular person when you are keeping someone in a prison. It's not only about discipline. You are having a gaze upon them. You are watching them continuously. This is what he mean by panopticism. Okay, someone at the top of the tower is watching all the quarters of the jail. Okay, so that's how the birth of prison came into being. He will also talk about gaze and disciplinary institution in this particular book, Discipline and Punishment. So do remember discipline and punishment, he talks about panopticism. Again, he will talk about gaze and disciplinary institution. Then history of sexuality, in which he talks about again history of sexuality, how we have come across this gender biasness, the segregation of gender, how we have started. I mean, initially we didn't have this any dress or anything like that in the primitive society. Then we started to say that okay, we need dress and we need to cover our body. That's how things started to change. So he will talk about that history in the history of sexuality. From the name itself, it is clear. So always remember, whatever work that I have mentioned right now, Foucault goes back to history in order to trace the important point that is mentioned in the title of the book. Okay, important concept. This is how you will find. I mean, he will mix history, structuralism, post-structuralism in his work. He will always give priority to history in most of his work. So I was talking about this discipline and punishment. It's a history as well as philosophy, published in 1975. In Discipline and Punishment, Foucault traces the development of the modern prison system through the legal and political history of France. The prison, he argues, embodies a view of justice that makes it fundamentally different from older forms of punishment, such as public execution and torture. Initially, we have had this public execution and torture system that you will find even in the time of Elizabeth and way before that. But then we came up with this idea of legal system that okay, we will give you second chance, and we came up with this idea of prison also. Okay, now in Foucault's analysis, prisons are places of discipline. Their purpose is not necessarily to prevent or even punish crime so much as to change the habits of offenders. Okay, we want to change the habits of offenders, but who knows, they will change even after putting them behind the bar for let's say 5 or 6 years. Although Foucault wrote extensively about power relations in public and private life, Discipline and Punishment remains his best known single work. Its insights are applicable not only to literal prisons but to any system such as a school, hospitals, workplaces. It's not that he's saying that prison in the literal sense. He's saying that a school, a hospital, a workplace, all of these places can become a prison when there is this there is this clash between power and knowledge occurs. Okay, because at each of these institution, we are actually exercising our power, isn't it? Then Madness and Civilization, a history of insanity in the age of reason. The study of the emergence of modern concept of mental illness in Europe, history of madness is formed from both Foucault's extensive archival work and his critique of what he saw as the moral hypocrisy of modern psychiatry. Okay, we have came up with this idea of mental illness, which according to Foucault is actually the hypocrisy of modern psychiatry. Standard history saw the 19th century medical treatment of madness as an enlightened liberation of the mad from the ignorance and brutality of preceding age. That's how they put it in front of our eyes to make it more glamorous. But that's not it. We are watching out one side of the story. But according to Foucault, the new idea that the mad were merely sick and in need of medical treatment was not at all a clear improvement on earlier conception. Example, the Renaissance idea that the mad were in contact with the mysterious forces of cosmic tragedy, or the 17th 18th century view of madness as a renouncing of reason. Okay, this is how we have perceived madness in Renaissance. We say that we used to say during Renaissance that this person is mad because he is in contact with some mysterious forces. Okay, with some divine forces, with some black forces. That's how the witch trial used to happen during the Elizabethan age and even after that, and the famous Salem witch trial, which happened in America when Puritans shifted to America. So the Renaissance idea that the mad were in contact with the mysterious forces of cosmic tragedy, or the 17th, 18th century view of madness as a renouncing of reason. Madness means renouncing of reason. I have denounced reason, that's why I am mad. That's how people used to perceive this madness. But then the Enlightenment idea said that it's not only you are mentally ill if you are behaving in such a way. And that's how asylum came into. Now, what are the important terms associated with Foucault? Discursive analysis, dispositive, episteme, heterotopia. Heterotopia again is a term that he used in one of his essay, that one of his lecture that he delivered at a university, which has been later compiled as an essay. So heterotopia. Hetero means many, topia means places. So literally it means many places. He talks about utopia, he talks about dystopia, and later in the last half of the essay, he talks about heterotopia. Okay. That utopia is all good kind of place, dystopia is all bad kind of place, and heterotopia is a kind of many place, a place that simultaneously exists at the same time doesn't exist. And then gaze, then power knowledge, then parrhesia. These are all the terms that he used. Foucault was openly a homosexual student of Marxist critic Louis Althusser. Now, this is some biographical information that I'm telling you now. Foucault was found dead in one of the hotel. Okay, he was staying in the hotel, and then the waiter came. He knocks the door. No one was replying. Then he opened the door, and Foucault was found dead in front of the gate only. Okay, it was locked from inside. No one knows how he died, whether it was a kind of heart attack or what. Now uh, his teacher Louis Althusser, he actually committed suicide. He also became insane in his later half of the life, and he strangled his wife and put her to death. Okay, so this is a biographical information. Now, postmodernism. The American writer Arnold Toynbee coined the term. This has been asked, I guess, in the UGC net. Arnold Toynbee, he coined this term postmodernism. This term came into vogue in the mid 20s. It's an umbrella term encompassing the unusual reversal of values and styles in the whole gamut of art, literature, science, humanities, music, architect, etc. Okay, so postmodernism comprises of many things. Okay, in literature, especially in history, you will find that modernism actually talks about fragmentation. It also talks about the objectivity that you will find in new critics, and it talks about the collage and the people of the modern times, they were always very pessimistic and hopeless about what is coming in the future, because they have watched out the two gruesome world war, then the economic depression of the 1929 in America, which continued to the later half of the 1930s, then Spanish Civil War. So all of them made them such pessimistic kind of person, such nihilistic kind of personality, that they were no more hopeful about the future. They were suffering from this existential crisis, thinking that this world will end very soon. Now, when we come to this postmodern age, postmodern thinker they will put forth this idea that why you are lamenting on the things that had happened in the past. So if life is like this, we are facing each day war, brutality, murder, killing, and death. Then face it. Face it with both hand. Welcome it. Welcome that situation with both hand instead of lamenting. We should enjoy that thing instead of lamenting, and that's how. This is what you will see in the absurd drama, that Even then, there is nothing happening in the story. The characters are enjoying the entire play. Even we as a reader will think that nothing happened in the play, but then there is something that will attract the attention of the reader. Okay, so instead of lamenting on what had happened in the past, you should enjoy even the meaninglessness of the life. You should welcome that with both hands and enjoy it. Okay, chronologically, the writer of the world writing after the Second World War are said to be associated with postmodernism. Some of the most prominent writers and philosophers who champion the trend of postmodernism are obviously Lyotard, then Derrida, Baudrillard, Foucault, David Deutsch, Barthes, Terry Eagleton, Bakhtin, Beatrice Spivak, Julia Kristeva, to name the few. Postmodernism understands that grand narrative, this is what Lyotard will say, that grand narrative hide silence and negate contradictions, instabilities and differences inherent in any social system. Now, Lyotard will say that earlier what happened, we always talked about this grand narrative. We have never talked about the narratives which were marginalized, which were subdued, which has been never talked about. We have given priority to this grand narrative only. We have always given preference to objectivity rather than subjectivity, and that is why we have lost something in the past. Now we that's how he came up with this idea that which becomes a kind of very important idea of postmodernism, that there should be no differentiation between the high art and low art. The way we treated high art, in the same way we are going to treat the low art. It's not like that Shakespeare only wrote the canonical text and important works, and someone who is a lady author, for instance, Afra Bain, we cannot read Afra Bain because she is a female author, her art is low. It's not like that. So the distinction between the high art and low art has been blurred by these postmodern thinkers. The grand narrative, the meta narrative has been destroyed by these postmodern thinkers. Okay, they believe in dissensus rather than consensus. Dissensus. That means, let's say, I, Ujjwal, Richa, Raji, we have different opinion associated with a particular point. So every opinion should be welcome when we are in a particular argument. Instead of saying that, okay, I am only correct, you all are wrong. No, you have to welcome all the opinions. Okay, and postmodernism, by giving preference to dissensus, actually is giving preference to democracy, isn't it? Democracy means that you have to accept the opinion of everyone instead of imposing your idea. So postmodernism actually supports democracy. So postmodernism favors mini narratives, stories that explain small practices and local events, very marginalized kind of stories which has never been given preference prior to that. Without pretending universality and finality, postmodernism realizes that history, politics, and culture are grand narratives of the power wielders. Those who were in power, they created these grand narratives. They exercised their power. Now it's time to break that shackle. Now, postmodernism refuses to acknowledge any objective reality, and that's how Baudrillard will come with this idea of simulacrum. Simulacrum. Okay, and he will say that there is no objective reality. Each reality is subjective, based upon our perception, my perception. This is what I was telling in the last class also. Something which is truth for you can be lie for me. Okay, I'm telling you as a truth, but I know that I'm lying. Only I know. So how can you come up with this idea of objective reality now? There is no objective reality. So it refuses to acknowledge any objective reality. Reality is a sort of construct or individual belief, or opinion. Okay, reality is also a construct, like everything else. Gender, caste, um, these all things are actually construct. In the same way, reality is also a construct. Then, so postmodern critic like Charles James seeks to represent reality in terms of symbols, complex ideas represent reality in terms of symbols and complex ideas. Postmodernism is marked by tireless questioning of traditional, prescriptive, monological, unified, coherent, cohesive ways of thinking and looking at anything. Postmodern is celebrating the montage, crisis, slackening, passage, intertextuality. These are all the important key terms associated with postmodernism. Now, Lyotard. Lyotard is the person who will talk about this idea of meta narratives. Okay, this is what I have told you just before this. So he said that the advanced society no longer require meta narratives of legitimation. Okay, that by exercising power, I will legitimize a meta narrative. This is what happened in the past. Now, this advanced society doesn't no longer require meta narrative. And what do he mean by meta narrative? He means all those isms, Marxism, Hegelian notion, communism. Remember what I have told you that to counterattack these isms and ideologies, structuralism came into being. In the same way, to counterattack these meta narratives and ideologies, Lyotard promotes this idea of breaking of the meta narrative. Okay, he's saying that we do not need those meta narrative, those ideologies, and those isms. We need to give equal priority to the mini narratives. So fragmentation is not a problem for postmodern society. They said we will welcome this fragmentation. Okay, if everything is fragmented, so there is nothing we can say as unified whole. There is nothing universal. So even our life is fragmented. We should welcome that. Fragmentation, according to Lyotard, is inevitable and desirable. Inevitable at the same time desirable because it is unity which is dangerous for human freedom. More unity, for example, if let's say a country has comprises of 100%, okay, 80 people will say that okay, I want this thing. I want bread loaf. Okay, bread loaf. I want bread. 20 people are saying that no, we want sweets. Then this unity actually becomes dangerous for the human freedom now. Those 80 people are exercising their power over the 20 people. So this fragmentation is inevitable and desirable. Fragmentation, we must have this dissensus. We must have different opinions because it is unity which is dangerous for human freedom and democracy. Terror or the heart of authoritarian rule in a society comes from the attempt to make all language game function according to the same rules. Okay, so when we exercise power, we want people to work upon the ideologies propagated by a person in power, isn't it? We submit ourselves in front of a person who is exercising power upon ourselves. So Lyotard was a French philosopher whose best known work, often to his chagrin, was his 1979 The Postmodern Condition. Very famous work. Most of the question you will get from here only in UGCD. The modernists believe in order, stability, and unity is what the postmodern thinker Lyotard calls a meta. Modernism works through meta narratives or grand narratives, while postmodernism questions and deconstructs meta narratives. A meta narrative is a story a culture tells about itself, its beliefs and practices. For example, India tells itself that it is a democratic and secular country, though there are numerous anti democratic, anti secular factions and practices in India, isn't it? So, in other words, India makes itself believe the falsehood that it is a democratic, secular country, but it is not. Okay, there are dissensus over this. So democracy and secularism are thus meta narratives. It's not only in the case of India, it's almost there in the case of Ukraine, Russia. So the democracy is this term has been only used, but then there is almost no democracy, even in the case of Palestine and Israel. Uh, yeah, coming to now to Frederick James, who talks about the idea of late capitalism. Apart from lived out this work, what a condition, please write down this work. Political Lightings. Okay, Political Lightings, 1993. He wrote this work, Political Lightings. 1993. Political writings, 1993. All right. Coming back to the idea of yeah, Freddie Jameson. So Jameson wrote, he was again a leftist Marxist critic, uh, and he was very much inspired by the Marxism, but then he counterattacked this. Okay, the Marxist notion by adding this idea of uh, post-capitalism and all, late capitalism, which he talks about in his book Postmodernism, or the cultural logic of late capitalism. Okay, the cultural logic of late capitalism. The Prison House of Language is another work written by him. The Political Unconsciousness, Late Marxism, Allegory and Ideology. These are all the works written. Okay. He also wrote Sartre, The Origins of His Style. He was very much influenced by Sartre, by the way. Now, Frederick Jameson, what he did is that has related modernism and postmodernism to the second, third phase of capitalism. He said that there are three phases of capitalism. The earlier phase when there was no almost no capitalism, but this modernism and postmodernism is related. Modernism is related to second phase of capitalism, and postmodernism is related to this late capitalism. The first phase of capitalism of the 18th-19th century, called market capitalism, witnessed the early technological developments such as that of the steam-driven motor and correspond to the realist phase. The early 20th century, this is the second page, with the development of electrical and internal combustion motors, witnessed the onset of monopoly capitalism and modernism. Okay, this is the second phase of capitalism. The postmodern era corresponds to the age of nuclear and electronic technologies. This is the third phase of capitalism. And consumer capitalism, where the emphasis is on marketing, selling, and consumption rather than production. Okay. That's how this advertisement we are making. We are watching out the advertisement. Okay. You will find that when you watch a movie, let's say on Set Max or at any channel, you will find that there are almost advertisement will run on for almost 5 to 10 minutes in between movies. So right now, the current notion of this capitalism is not the issue of production. They have no issue of production. They have this issue to propagate, to do mediation between the consumer and the production house. They want you to consume that. They will make you accept their notions, whatever they are saying, you will agree with them, only then you are going to buy them. So they work on that strategy, marketing strategy, instead of production. They are no more concerned about production. Once you will find a thing better or you will find it good, useful, you will automatically start consuming it. So the dehumanized, globalized world wipes out individuals uh, and national identities in favor of multinational marketing. This is the third phase of capitalism. For Frederick Jameson, this is the important idea that he put forth. Okay, the late idea of late capital. Then Baudrillard, who talks about the idea of simulacra and simulacrum. So the French philosopher Baudrillard has conceptualized the postmodern surface culture as a simulacrum. Okay, the surface thing that we see is actually, according to Baudrillard, is simulacrum. Okay, the objectification of things. Now he also wrote a book on simulation. Okay, simulacra and uh, simulation. Now he wrote this simulation in 1983. Uh, but before that, uh, his work are expression of postmodern philosophy. He too came to be very critical of Marxism and structuralism, like that of other leftist Marxist critics. For Baudrillard, the postmodern world was a world of simulacra. What is this world of simulacra? Where we could no longer differentiate between what is real and what is simulation. For example, you play a video game. Okay, you went so deep into that you find, for at least for a momentary kind of point of time, or at least for, let's say, 5 minutes or 10 minutes, you find that it is reality, but it is actually a simulation, isn't it? So this postmodern world was a world of simulacra where um, we could no longer differentiate between reality and simulation. What is reality and what is simulation? And if you remember the very famous line that he said, that Gulf War never happened. Okay, Gulf War never occurred. It was a simulation created by media. Okay, the Middle East invasion by the United Nations, what we call as Gulf War. So it never happened, according to Baudrillard. It is simulation. It is a projection that has been depicted by media. For the first time, the media was, live streaming the war. Okay, the Gulf War. So this is what he mean by simulacra, world of simulacra, world which is no more a kind of reality, but full of simulation. Okay. Now, simulacra represented nothing but themselves. Was no other reality to which they referred. Okay, simulacra represented nothing. They represented themselves. And they are also saying that there is no reality beyond this. What you see is the reality. If you see a Mickey Mouse in a park or anywhere, that is the reality. Do not try to go beneath that, beneath the surface, that who is under that Mickey Mouse costume. Okay, what you see is the reality. Remember, if you start peeling off this orange, you will not find the center. So do not search for center, the reality, the truth. It doesn't exist. What you see at the surface, the orange and its peel, that is the reality. Do not go to the center. You will not find. A simulacrum is not merely an imitation or duplication. It is the substitution of the original by a simulated fake image. Okay, substitution of Mickey Mouse, which doesn't exist. That's why we have substituted by creating a person with a costume of Mickey Mouse. Contemporary world is a simulacrum where reality has been thus replaced by false images. This would mean, for instance, that the Gulf War that we know from newspaper and television reports has no connection whatsoever to what can be called the real Iraq War. The simulated image of Gulf War has become so much more popular and real than the real war that Baudrillard argues that the Gulf War did not take place at all. In other words, in postmodern world, there are no originals, only copies, no territories, only maps, no reality, only simulations. Okay, no truth. Okay, there is no ultimate reality, no universality. So here Baudrillard is not merely suggesting that the postmodern world is artificial. He is also implying that we have lost the capacity to discriminate between real and artificial. Okay, and this is one of the main concern of the present post-human theory and criticism. That what is real and what is it artificial? Are these artificial technology, AI, are going to take over the humanity, the human beings? That is the biggest question right now we have. So this is all about the postmodernism. We have finished this. I will talk about Marxism in the next class. Few of the theories associated with Marxism. So in Marxism, we will read Karl Marx and Engels, Louis Althusser, Antonio Gramsci, Pierre Bourdieu. They are the earlier, because I was talking about postmodernism. That's why I'm talking about the Marxist, leftist Marxist critique who came after these Marxists. They are the core traditional Marxists. Okay, Karl Marx, Louis Althusser, Antonio Gramsci, Pierre Bourdieu, Paul Ricoeur, Ernest Mendel. Although Pierre Bourdieu, then Paul Ricoeur, Ernest Mendel, they are not so old. But then before that, all those authors are actually the founding figure of Marxism. They are the earliest available Marxist thinker. And after these thinkers comes Lyotard, then Jameson. Okay, so we will talk about them in the next class.